I will be handing it off to our project team to carry you all through a productive discussion. So thank you for joining us in the second round of the Buildings Working Group. I do want to note that we are recording this meeting, which will be posted on our engagement site and may be used for public viewing. Before we get into welcoming remarks, I do want to note that we will be providing language translation for today's meeting. I'd like to introduce you to our interpreter, Giovanna. She's going to be explaining our Spanish and English language features that we have available for the workshop today. So Giovanna, if you can please come off mute and tell everybody about the features, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Giovanna Wormsbecker, and I'll be your Spanish interpreter during this meeting. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous interpretation from English to Spanish. Please note that a translation globe will not appear until after I've read through all language instructions. Therefore, we're asking that everyone joining us for this event, please select your preferred language to facilitate hearing presenters and participants clearly. If you're on a laptop or a desktop, you will see a globe at the bottom right of your screen. Please click on the globe, this icon that says Interpretation, and then select English. If you're on an iPad or a similar device, locate the three-dot menu on the upper right and select Language Interpretation, then select English. When it's your turn to speak, please remember to be loud and clear and speak at a moderate pace, as the interpreter will be interpreting simultaneously into the other language. Buenas tardes a todos, me llamo Giovanna Wormsbecker y seré su intérprete en español durante esta reunión. Esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional del inglés al español. El globo de traducción no va a aparecer hasta que se hayan leído todas las instrucciones en los dos idiomas. Por lo tanto, pedimos a todos los presentes que seleccionen su idioma preferido para facilitar escuchar a presentadores y participantes con claridad. Si están utilizando una computadora, verán un icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla a la derecha en forma de globo que dice Interpretación. Haga clic ahí y seleccione español. Si están utilizando un iPad o su teléfono, localice el menú de 3 puntos que aparece arriba a la derecha. Haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y luego elija español. Cuando sea su turno de hablar, por favor recuerde hablar con voz fuerte y clara y a un paso moderado, ya que la intérprete estará interpretando simultáneamente el otro idioma. Thank you.
Thank you. Our team is initiating the language feature now. So just a reminder that everyone must select a language even that you prefer, even if it is English. So we will be using a variety of methods to hear from you today. You will have the same features whether you are joining from your computer or your cell phone, and you can type in your thoughts using the chat feature, which is located at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining by cell, you can select the 3 dots at the lower right of your screen and open up the chat. If you would like to speak over the audio, please use the raise your hand option, also located at the bottom of your screen. And if you're calling in, please enter *9. Additionally, we will pause in between our speakers to ask you questions and hear your thoughts. The majority of our time will be focused on hearing your comments and answering your questions as best as we can. Here are those same Zoom features, but from a mobile view for anyone who may be joining from their mobile device through the Zoom app. If you select more at the bottom taskbar in the Zoom, you will see the options to chat, select your language of choice, and raise your hand to indicate that you would like to speak. All right, so there you go. Thank you for taking the time to listen to some of these features. So again, my name is Yasamin. I'm part of the project team that the County of San Diego Land Use and Environment Group has formed to help move forward in developing the regional decarbonization framework. Today, you will hear from Mortaza Baxamusa, the Program Manager for Regional Sustainability in the Land Use and Environment Group Executive Office, and Scott Anders, the Director of Energy Policy Initiative Center at the University of San Diego. We also have a few short presentations prepared for you by the Building Electrification Institute, Hitsky Development Corporation, and the UA Local Union 230. Before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to just set the stage for how these working groups are structured and our agenda for the day, and also to remind you that we are still continuing to use the ENG platform to post our working group documents, recordings, as well as materials to review. If you have any questions on registering to the site and accessing your working group documents, please send us an email and we will help you through that. As some of you may know, and for those of you who are joining for the first time, we have set up 5 special topic working groups to focus on key emitting sectors and solutions for addressing our changing climate. These will categorize and guide the development of the implementation playbook with a draft ready by the end of the year. So for today's agenda, we will begin with 3 invited guests. Danny Makis from the Building Electrification Institute, Ginger Hitsky from Hitsky Development Corporation, and Sean Ellis from United Association Local Union 230. After the presentations, our consultant Scott Anders from the Energy Policy Initiative Innovative Center at USD will discuss their approach to the implementation playbook and the draft matrix of decarbonization actions for the building sector. Mortaza will then facilitate an open discussion where we would all like to hear from all of you. So with that, I will hand it over to Mortaza to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Yasemin. So we have a new and exciting approach to getting input into the development of our implementation strategy. We have heard that there are many stakeholders and experts that have given thought to the plans, programs, and pilots to begin implementing decarbonization in our region. So we wanted to gather the ideas, learn from the knowledge out there in the community and other parts of the country and the world, so that we can focus on action. Now, some of you have already attended prior workshops, so you're already familiar with this format, and some of you are new, so welcome. The format of this workshop, where we have flipped the roles such that the stakeholders present and the government listens, is a pilot of our own. So I hope that you will come along with us in this journey to explore new ways of public outreach. If this is successful, we would be building an online repository of ideas or an ideas bank with 5 to 7 minute presentations followed by questions from the moderator. That would be me today. So today's first presentation is from Danny Makis. Danny has been an assistant director with the Building Electrification Institute, or BEI, since April 2021. Her work focuses on helping cities thoughtfully design and iterate on building electrification policies to ensure equitable outcomes across health, affordability, and workforce development. Welcome, Danny.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much to the county for bringing me into this call. I'm really excited to be here. You can go to the next slide. For a quick overview of my presentation today, I'll start off with a few slides about the need to address existing buildings within the decarbonization movement, and then speak to the need to match any policies with supportive programs. And I'll finish off with BEI's recommendation to lead with co-creation for the design and implementation of this effort. Next slide. So there are a variety of reasons why the decarbonization of our existing buildings is critical, but I'm only going to highlight 2 major reasons today just for the sake of time. Next slide. The first is climate change. Across the US, on-site fossil fuel use in buildings accounts for about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions, the majority of which comes from space heating and water heating. Within cities, though, this proportion can be a lot higher. For example, in the city of San Diego, on-site fossil fuel use accounts for around 20% of citywide greenhouse gas emissions. So this demonstrates that, in order to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction targets, existing buildings must be part of the decarbonization movement. Next slide. The second major reason is to address existing buildings is health. Gas appliances are shown to worsen indoor air quality. For example, in homes with gas stoves, children have up to a 42% increased risk of developing asthma. So achieving equitable health outcomes across our communities will require that we address health impacts from gas use within our existing buildings. Next slide. From our experience working across BEI's partner cities, and we have 12 partner cities across the US right now, we've found that voluntary programs will not be enough to accelerate this transition for 100% of existing building stock. But in order to advance action, governments will need to pursue policies that go beyond voluntary and actually require existing buildings to make these retrofits. And there are both benefits and challenges to developing policy requirements. Some of the benefits are the potential to lower utility bills, an opportunity to build an inclusive workforce, guaranteeing the greenhouse gas reductions, and expanding healthy indoor environments. But we also must address the challenges that come with these policies. So there's a risk of increased costs around rent and utility bills, which could lead to housing displacement. There's significant financial and technical support needed to help buildings comply with policies, and that can lead to administrative or enforcement burdens on public agencies. And lastly, there's a need for significant stakeholder engagement to plan and implement these policies effectively and equitably, which I'll get into a bit more detail later on. Next slide. I also just wanted to include a brief list of examples of policy requirements for existing buildings, and this isn't comprehensive, it's just some that might be a bit more common. On the left are building level policies that cities can enact, such as building performance standards. But utilities can also pursue a more managed transition in collaboration with cities, which you can see on the right side. And just for the sake of time, I won't dive into any of these, but I'm happy to send out additional resources if that's helpful. Next slide. So while we need policy requirements to reach 100% of existing buildings, these requirements must be paired with supportive programs, which includes funding programs to cover portions of these costs, as well as technical assistance support to help building owners and contractors comply with the technical requirements. Supportive funding will help ensure that low-income homeowners will not bear the costs of retrofit requirements, and it will ensure that retrofit costs don't get passed from owners onto renters, which will work to avoid housing displacement. It's also important that public agencies look beyond just electrification into energy efficiency, electric readiness, and health and safety retrofits. So what we reference as equitable building decarbonization. However, existing programs that currently cover costs across all of these areas often don't coordinate, or they're not all cataloged in one place, which is hard because in order for public agencies to thoughtfully plan for new funding or new supportive programs, it's important that public agencies fill gaps rather than trying to duplicate existing efforts. For example, some general trends we've seen is that there's minimal to no funding available for electric readiness and health and safety retrofits, which many homes must first address before they can electrify. Also, low income units often face larger gaps in cost coverage compared against market rate units. And moderate income households face a unique challenge because they're not eligible for many low income funding programs, but they are also largely unable to afford the full cost of the retrofits, even still. So if public agencies are pursuing policies that require existing buildings to do these retrofits, those agencies should consider these gaps in funding and pursue opportunities to fill these gaps to ensure that buildings can equitably decarbonize. Next slide. And so this all begs the question, though, of how public agencies should go about designing these policies and programs, which is where BEI suggests leading with co-creation for both design and implementation. Next slide. So what is co-creation? We define co-creation as a process of deep iterative collaboration between government staff and leaders rooted in and accountable to communities of concern. And the goal of co-creation is to move on this spectrum from a position of ignoring or just simply informing community stakeholders into a practice of involving, collaborating with, and eventually deferring to these stakeholders throughout the policy development and implementation process. And this effort acknowledges that people who have lived experience of existing inequities have critical expertise that is actually essential to crafting successful policies that simultaneously achieve both climate targets and advance equity. Next slide. I do want to acknowledge, though, that co-creation is a really different way of engaging with community for most staff at public agencies and utilities. This process requires engaging with CBOs early and throughout the planning process, dedicating resources to the process, maintaining flexible timelines, acknowledging harmful histories, etc. And many of these actions will likely feel hard or uncomfortable. And so over the long term, really committing to co-creation may require new training or background for the staff doing the implementation work. Any questions for me?
So thank you, Danny. Really appreciate an expansive presentation, and I wanted to commend you for coming here and sharing with us a perspective, given that you have that BEI has a range of experience across almost a dozen cities in America, 4 of them here in California. With that kind of expansive knowledge, I wanted to kind of point out of that you gave very broad brush suggestions on supportive programs that include one-stop shop, equitable funding, and pairing energy efficiency with this kind of energy conversion. Are there any specific suggestions that you have for our region?
Well, right now what we're seeing, where we're seeing success in places that have framed climate action alongside other major issues, such as building out a green workforce or addressing holistic housing needs, including kind of the current and growing inequity in housing affordability, health, and safety. Ultimately, this framing gets at the need for people across communities to see themselves in this transition and see themselves within this work. And climate isn't always the right message to achieve that. So that would be kind of one area to focus on. Another is in places that we've seen success in places that have pursued local funding mechanisms that are dedicated to equitable climate action. So for example, in Denver, they have a climate protection fund, which was a voter approved sales tax. So they have around $40 million of dedicated climate action funds and are dedicating around 20% of that to building retrofits. So that's another key strategy where we're seeing success in cities or regions.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. It does, in terms of just following up on that, both in terms of outside our region, but also now that think a little bit about California, given that California has been leading in some of these kind of with the California Energy Commission and Title 24 standards and appliance standards. Where do you think we could, like as a region, think of what's coming in the future, and where are the gaps in our knowledge base?
Yeah, I think this is a great flag. And I covered a lot of ground across the policy options, the need for supportive programming, and leading with co-creation, and kind of each of those all have their own gaps and lessons from other places that we all can be learning from. And so I think for the building policies, BEI has more detailed resources on our website, such as equitable approaches to a BPS policy. So for example, if you all kind of have specifically want to lean in on building performance standard, there's a lot of good information out there on how to do that equitably. And then for the supported programs side of things, BEI also just developed a resource for the city of Berkeley and for the Bay Area, where we analyzed where there are gaps in costs currently being covered by existing funding programs. And so that really narrows down, like, what are all the existing funding programs across the state, federal, utility level that are being applied in the Bay Area and in Berkeley specifically? And then what are the gaps in costs not being covered? And that will help Berkeley and other jurisdictions in the Bay more strategically target those gaps. And that's also on our website if you all want to kind of consider that for the San Diego region, or if that could be a helpful gap in knowledge that you all want to fill for your planning.
Thank you. And Danny, one last question. It's about regional collaboration. And you can give me a more general answer, but I specifically wanted to take a look at the co-creation, how you kind of build that as a model. It's community driven. It could be also, in partnership with labor, and how do we make it work for our workers and residents. And
Mhm.
in that, the question is really motivated by what can the county do in bringing everyone to the table for regional action?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think keeping it high level, I would start off by collaborating with community groups about this issue, understanding what they want for their homes and for their buildings and how they see themselves within this transition. I think, investing in those strong relationships across the public agencies, both at the county level and communities, that will help build out a coalition of support across multiple different interests for this work. And that coalition will not only increase chances of success for this effort, but it will also help public agency staff across at the county level and across all the jurisdictions you all work with. It will help you all justify why you're prioritizing this work for your own work plans. And it will support you all on budget requests or fundraising efforts that will ensure that, the supportive programs that I discussed can go into place. So I think investing in that coalition of support now and kind of doing that at the county level and being creative on how to weave in the city levels across that effort, I think is a great place to start.
Thank you, Danny. Appreciate your presentation and your
Thank you so
time.
much. Thank
So
you.
before I transition over to the next, I see some hands raised, and if you can please hold off on your coming on the audio until the presentations are completed. That way we will have the continuity of this format, and then we'll have an open discussion as well as questions on particular topics. I want to say the next presenter is Ginger Hitsky. So Ginger is the president of Hitsky Development. She has over 20 years of working knowledge of discretionary land use entitlement processes, including knowledge of general plans and amendments. Oh, she also serves on our planning commission, although she's not here as a commissioner, and has served on several numerous boards, including Circulate Housing, Scenic Housing Federation, that I worked with closely in the past, as well as Boys and Girls Club of San Marcos Chamber of Commerce, Inclusive Action for the City, which is an LA-based economic development organization. Ginger is well respected in the community, and I really appreciate your time. So we have a little bit of a different format for Ginger. Instead of a PowerPoint, we will be having a discussion about the topics we had arranged prior to this conversation. So if you can put on the next slide, thank you. So Ginger, can you hear us?
I can. Hi, Murtaza.
All right, excellent. So Ginger, the first topic that is up there is crisis of affordable housing and climate change. You are an expert on affordable housing, and the world we live in around us is changing. And sometimes both of them seem to be going in the wrong direction. For most common people, it's a vicious cycle where one worsens the impact of the other. Can you elaborate from what you've seen from your experience, how these two crises kind of create this kind of vicious cycle?
Sure. So as we had discussed earlier, and please forgive me, I speak pretty simply and I am very opinionated, so will be completely sprinkled with a ton of editorial. People hate housing. And unfortunately, because of, we're all emotional creatures, and, people bring their emotions to their electeds, and electeds make decisions. And it just so happens that, housing is not a very popular thing. If you want to fill a city council chamber with tons of voters, bring up housing, and then folks will come out. So if you flash forward through California's history on its land use patterns, because of those emotions, we have pushed housing out further and further. Sandag's official, or maybe unofficial statement on what to do with housing in previous years in the 80s and 90s, when trying to address where to put housing units, the idea was to blow off steam into Riverside County, which is where I happen to live. Even though, when we moved to California, I'm from San Diego, that's where we moved. My husband as well, but we are super commuters that live in Temecula. So what we have done is we have pushed off housing into more further flung areas because of our emotions. And now we've just created a vicious cycle where the places that we can build that are just more affordable by nature, all to the northeast of where I am right now, because it's just easier to build, are greenfield areas. And it's much more difficult to build in areas closer to where job centers are for a variety of reasons. And so this is just kind of a never-ending cycle that's just continuing to get worse.
Thank you, Ginger. And it's just a tragedy that it's both of these are public issues, public health, public impact the wallet, in these times of inflation. And we also know that oftentimes the segment of the population that gets impacted the most are those with the least resources.
Absolutely.
Our disadvantaged community disproportionately impacted, and those that have historically borne the impacts of prior disinvestments. So could you, you've been close to this, and it is really informative from an affordable housing development perspective. You've worked with this clientele for decades now. How would you say, how is the cycle, this vicious cycle that I described, worse for those with limited means and choices, and in terms of the economic burden?
Certainly. Well, not only has this been the population that I've been building housing for, and this is who I have been. I am the product of a low-income household. And so, just sort of pushing this out a little bit more, the folks who have no choice but to, commute to work in further flung places. Let's say you are working in hospitality in Del Mar, or you are working in hospitality pretty much anywhere on the coast. No one's going to pay you $150,000, $200,000 so that you can afford to live in an apartment in La Jolla. And so you are going to have to travel further. And so with additional commuting, is going to come reduced amount of time, but also increased costs if you have children for childcare. Just increased cost for travel alone. The time that it takes to commute if you are not driving is pretty extraordinary. It takes about 45 minutes to get on the trolley from Lemon Grove trolley station to downtown San Diego is about 45 minutes there. And if you're driving, it's a little bit quicker, but we're trying to get folks out of their cars. So it's a compounding effect that, heard it yesterday in city council. You are not entitled to the housing item that was up is housing a human right at the San Diego City Council. And there were many callers that called in and said housing is not a human right, and that if you work hard enough, you can achieve what you want like they did. And that's just not an actual reality. And so these things are they're compounding one another. It is the most difficult for those who are on the lowest income stream, as most difficult things are, but it's just a compounding effect.
So thank you, Ginger. The purpose of this workshop and this series is to inform the development of our implementation playbook, where we're looking for specific actions that we can take individually, as businesses, as community, and as governments. So across all these different scales. So we're looking for solutions, and this is where Elise. Yeah, thanks. This is where I've been asking for folks to focus on three potential areas. And so I'll go over each of them with you, Ginger, so we can cover as much as we can on the intersections between housing affordability, climate, and equity. So the first question is about justice and equity in terms of in what way could the county address this issue about housing affordability in a humane way that also is a climate solution, particularly for disadvantaged communities?
Well, I think my answer is going to be the same for every one of these bullet points. I would first say that what you're doing right now is what you're doing, and what the county and what I do see the region doing as a whole right now is actually very encouraging. So I've been working in housing since the early 1990s and have seen firsthand the changing attitudes of elected officials in local government. And it is night and day right now. So I will say there's hope because the attitude is so different. The other thing of what you are trying to do right now is incredibly important because you're trying to have every agency and organization that participates in the way that we utilize our land and the way that we move about within it, trying to get everyone in lockstep, right? And coming up. So this right here is exactly what we need. I would say from just, really kind of getting down into the weeds as someone who has to go out and find money to pull together money for affordable housing, the more that plans, all the different types of plans, whether it be general plans, a municipal code, capital improvement plans, climate action plans, the regional housing plans, all of those, to the extent that those line up, and that everyone is talking the same language and walking in the same direction, it makes it much easier for me to make the case to, say, Sacramento for funding that they have, that, San Diego is perfectly set up to receive this money to implement the goals of the state. Because at the end of the day, all of this takes money. If it were easy and if it were easily attainable, we would have plentiful housing. But the reality is it is wildly challenging and nearly impossible to just put together a single transaction and make it work at any moment in time. So I would just say, helping to create a pathway through having all the different types of agencies and organizations working in the same direction, which I know is pretty impossible, but you can't achieve it until you start doing what you're doing, which is to say we need to get everybody on board. Down at the local city level, if cities are putting together their capital improvement plans and creating, making sure there's sufficient water lines, making sure there's sufficient sewer lines, perhaps making sure even in the private sector that there is proper, sufficient electricity in a neighborhood. I know that, and I don't want to keep going on and on, I'm trying to be mindful of the time, but with respect to electrification, I'm building a project right now where I have to do these weird hoops to bring sufficient electricity to each building because there isn't enough electricity on this side of the street in the neighborhood. And so I can't quite explain what my dry utility consultants have concocted for us, but I just know it costs a fortune, right? And so, making sure that our infrastructure is sufficient in our infill areas is really important. Like you and I had talked about, Martha, I said, we're not going to stop building out in other places if we're allowed to. I don't do this, but no shade to people who do because they're providing housing, but it's so much less expensive and it's not controversial to build out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's yelling at you. Nobody's yelling at the mayor. Nobody's yelling at their county supervisors. And it's really inexpensive to do because what I do, which is building in neighborhoods that are 100+ years old, have 100+ years of a lot of problems that I also have to correct And then I also have to meet all of the new standards of today. So it's incredibly expensive to build infill housing. And if you want to see it be more affordable, let's make the conditions as close to greenfield as possible, with infrastructure that is already taken care of, and with, you know, where one project built in 2022 isn't, you know, addressing problems created in 1922.
Thank you so much, Ginger. We're so fortunate to have you on our planning commission, and thank you so much for joining us today and for your insight and wisdom. I think you covered all the questions I had, and our team is super excited. They've taken notes and will inform the implementation playbook. So thank you.
Really great job. Really great job with what you're doing.
Take care. Bye, Ginger. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Sean. Sean Ellis is an organizer for United Association Local 230, which is the San Diego local of the United Association. He is a master instructor for the United Association Instructor Training Program. It's located in Santee. It's a wonderful facility. I would highly recommend people visit that. He is a co-chair of the California State Pipe Trades Veterans Association. He's a veteran himself and a member of the AFL-CIO Union Veteran Council. Go ahead, Sean.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. B, for the intro. So, hey, everybody, how you doing? I'm going to try to close my motivation because I got to set my timer here in about 2 seconds for this 7 minutes, okay? So before I get started, go ahead, next slide, please. Okay, awesome. I'm gonna tell you a little story about the United Association. We've been active in this region since October 11th, 1889. We are the oldest labor union here in the San Diego and in Imperial County regions, right? So the United Association, refrigeration, plumbers, steam fitters, HVAC technicians of Local Union 230 is proud to be the oldest continuing operating craft union in San Diego, okay? Our members are the piping professionals that provide the San Diego community with the complex piping systems that unfortunately people are trying to take away. So what do we put in, everybody, right? We'll put in everything from the toilet that you use to take that sewage out to a sanitation processing facility. We install your high efficiency heat pumps. We do district thermal heating, and yes, I have members in industries of the fossil fuel industry. And the reason why, you know, we're a stakeholder here, the reason why we're so active with our 2,500 members here locally is these members are going to lose their careers. These members are going to have significant change in their infrastructure. So today, we're going to talk about how we feel as a plumbing union, a labor union, where we can find solutions for electrification, how we can move forward. Next slide, please. Awesome, awesome. So what's the main goal for today, right? Like Dr. B and myself has had so many great conversations about this. The big thing is county-owned buildings, right? I do construction, everybody. The only thing the county can do with this regional decarbonization is to control the buildings that they have and to remodel them, to retrofit them, to make them more environmentally friendly. The truth is this, the majority of the private industry needs to decarbonize. So when we start to talk about what we're doing today, we're going to start talking about how the county needs to set the example, and choosing winners and losers, choosing one system over another system isn't gonna suffice, as I will talk about a little bit later. Okay, our community, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about the San Diego regional residents, our visitors, our businesses, right? I heard a lot today from two previous speakers, right? They talked about GHG emissions, right? The Electrification Coalition, okay, and they talked about GHG emissions and electrification, right? So that's for our community, but we also need to remember this. We have a big port. We have industry here. We have businesses that pay high amounts of taxes to really keep our system going, right? And as a union leader, we need to start asking, are we creating business models to decarbonize? If we're not doing that, then the private industry will never change, and there's no need to do it, because at the end of the day, the systems that we currently have can meet those demands. And so as the UA, we're going to start talking about that, how we can go more green, okay? Grid reliability. Our region just a few months ago was experiencing flex alerts. It's 2022, United States of America. We shouldn't be doing that, right? So we're gonna go over some systems and how we can alleviate those flex alerts, how we can do that. Okay, costs. There are fluctuating costs due to the gas global economy, right? I could talk for hours about Ukraine and the geopolitical field right now when it comes to natural gas and how it's actually affecting our national security, etc. But what we do here at the local level will start to pyramid all the way up to DC, let's be honest, right? And as San Diego, the 6th largest city in the country, one of the largest economies in California, what we do here, Dr. B, and so many great leaders here on this call, is going to set the example for the future, right? When we start to talk about these items. And then, we need to start talking about, if we're going to start looking at electrification, how does our infrastructure fit in? How does microgridding fit in? And how can we find these solutions? Okay, so next slide, please. Awesome. Okay, solutions, right? So let's just be honest, right? Circular economy. I can talk about that.
It looks like there's an issue with your internet, Sean.
Sean, what happened to you?
We'll just give it a couple more seconds.
There he is.
All right, sorry about that, Dr. B. I don't know what happened there. I just lost the internet. So where did I leave off at before I was frozen in time?
Just keep going, Sean.
Okay, awesome.
Sounds
Thank you.
like-
Sorry about that. That was that was weird. Okay, so
Circular
we're going to talk
economy.
about today about fuel cell microgridding. Okay, we believe the future is going to be microgrids. If we're going to take decarbonization seriously and make an impact on GHGs, microgridding is the way where we can make significant small impacts in several areas using our systems. Okay, especially when we start to talk about hydrogen fuel cell technology that's coming online as we speak, that can help electrify the buildings that so many great leaders want to do here. So then I want to talk very briefly on district thermal energy. Okay, essentially, everybody, what district thermal energy is the future. They're smart buildings. It's where buildings in downtown San Diego, or better yet, New York City, just passed a new ordinance and a new plan for district thermal heating. And so kind of when we talk about district thermal heating, it's essentially buildings communicating with each other in this new world to share loads of energy to go ahead and not use electric pumps and not use the electrical grid that we currently have. And so we'll hit that a little bit today. Okay, and then energy reduction. Okay, we're going to talk briefly about on-site water reuse. Okay, when we talk about building electrification, building decarbonization, you have to talk about wastewater. We have to talk about excesses at that point. Okay, we're going to talk about high efficiency heat pumps that we are currently building as we speak in colleges like UCSD. We just put some stuff in and the airport the other day. So we'll talk a little bit about how that's going to be the future of heating and cooling smaller square space projects. Okay, it's not the answer for large scale projects, but it will be the answer for smaller scale projects. And then we're going to do waste recovery and geothermal energy. So next slide, please. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about fuel cell microgrids. Okay. In my next few slides, there'll be an example of what they look like. Okay. Currently, right now, we're installing rooftop solar. They're installing battery energy, battery storage, which creates tons and tons of job from IBW brothers and sisters, iron workers, and so many building trades folks. But here's the fact. When we look at all of the above approach to decarbonization, those are jobs created for a significant amount of one labor union or two labor unions, while there's a whole section of labor movement that will not benefit from solar panels and battery storage. So where's our opinion? You need solar and batteries just as much as you need fuel cells. So let's talk about business models. Lithium is $77,000 per metric ton. So if you're going to start to electrify and we're going to start to do these items, you're going to increase the cost of living. As an example, San Onofre Nuclear Energy Station was shut down. That increased your guys' cost of bills 33%. That's what happened. Okay. When you start to shut down these peaker plants, when you start to shut down these fossil fuel natural gas plants, guess what's going to happen? You're going to increase the load demand for electricity and take away a baseload energy system. So what do you replace it with? What is the solution? The solution is fuel cell microgrids. These are items that are literally the same dimension as a battery pack that already use the very same infrastructure with either a blended or renewable natural gas substance to then go into the fuel cell and create renewable green electricity to then be wired into the building for your electrification of your county building or your project, while you're still using the same infrastructure, lowering the cost of construction and maintaining baseload energy. Here's the facts. When the sun goes down and the wind goes away, your power goes away with intermediate power. When you use fuel cell technology, we can run that constantly. Okay. And when we plug in, and Dr. B is going to go, we're talking about building electrification. Well, if you do fuel cells connected to your building electrification and do a waste to fuel plant with renewable green hydrogen or renewable green natural gas, now you have your circularity, right? So now you throw your piece of trash away, goes to a processing center, sends a green sustainable source of fuel to a fuel cell to then electrify your city. What's so cool about these projects is that we can actually put them in neighborhoods and power whole neighborhoods with these new Bloom Energy fuel cells, okay? It's gonna lower your emissions, okay? It's gonna take away the fact that you are gonna slowly transition a industry, not the workers. You're gonna transition a industry to a more sustainable, greener, sustainable fuel while not losing the plumbers and pipe fitters that install your natural gas. So we'll install the pipeline to the fuel cell. The fuel cell will create the green electricity to electrify your building. We'll do on-site water reuse, and now you have a full circular item. And I haven't even talked to you about what you can do with district thermal heating and wastewater and how we can create energy from that item as well. What the output is always going to be reliable electricity, reliable. These are items that can run constantly while still providing that electricity. Here's the facts. You are going to use dirty natural gas at nighttime when your solar and wind does not work. And battery packs, well, like I said, we don't have any lithium and they're in war-torn countries, right? Which is increasing the cost of the global demand of lithium and rare metals, to say the least, right? So when we talk about costs, the goal of this workshop is to not only decarbonize and be green and as green as we can, but to ensure that we're lowering the bills for the community. Okay. When we start to think about this at the full picture, you have to understand, if you do not create business models, if you do not look out for lowering the cost and doing that, then this is all just going to be hot wind and a bunch of talking. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, awesome. So we'll start talking about Bloom Energy. Okay, we have a contractor, ADCO, one of our largest contractors here in San Diego, installed these hydrogen fuel cells here in San Diego State University. Okay, there's an example of where we're actively doing it in our region. Okay, Staples Center inside Los Angeles is actually being ran. That whole facility is being ran 100% off of fuel cell technology at the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles. USD is running this. We install this. Our members install this. So does it work? Yeah, it works. We're installing it. Okay. Odds are, if you take a look at your cool Tesla chargers, I bet you there's a hydrogen fuel cell powering it. All right. So these items are here. They're getting better every single day. And if you take a look gander at it, those of you that are not in construction, they look familiar, right? They look like battery packs, don't they? So they're the same dimensions. They could be put in the same applications. And here's the cool thing about hydrogen fuel cell. The plumbers and pipe fitters install them. We run the pipe to them. And guess who runs them in the building? Electricians. That's work for everybody. Laborers move the unit, and all we need to ensure at this time, everybody, is that there's good labor provisions on the work being done, okay? So there's an example of what we want to see, right? The San Diego University of San Diego campus consumes a lot of energy during times that solar installation does not provide electricity, and the fuel cell allows the university to further reduce its emissions in a cost-effective source. Going right back to your second presenter, which was talking about, hey, if you electrify and we start to build, we increase the cost, we increase costs, right? On not only the constructors, the business that eventually buys that property, but eventually it makes its way down to the next to the people. Okay, next slide, please. Awesome. So right here is an example of what the UA International is pushing across the country. Okay, so just to kind of give you guys an understanding of who we are, we're an international union like every other labor union. You guys will probably run into your significant spaces. Way we see this decarbonization framework and how important this meeting is today and so many other workshops is high efficiency performance strategies and buildings are the wave of the future. And when we start to talk about where we're going in the future, we need to talk about jobs. Okay, can the utility worker, a gas pipe fitter, have that transition into an industry that is greener using bioenergy instead of what we've used in the past? Okay, can the cost lower energy bill? Can that building actually lower the cost of the energy when it comes to the consumer, when it comes to the developer, when it looks at the full picture of what we're going to do in that building, right? We want safe, reliable, consistent energy flow. Okay, right now we don't have consistent energy flow in our systems. That's why we have flex alerts. Okay, all right. Health, does it improve indoor and outdoor quality air? Is it combusting inside? With your fuel cells and these new systems coming on that are changing per project, let me be clear, okay? High performance building strategies are based off your building, your project of where you are. So what you do in San Diego can be different when you just move a city over to Encinitas, okay? And vice versa in this region. So it's really important that we truly understand where we're going with that, okay? So thermal energy exchange, geothermal exchange heat pumps, okay? Geothermal heat pumps use 25 to 50% less energy than their electric counterparts, okay? So when we talk about consuming energy, you got to have that conversation. Is electric heat pumps, they are very efficient if you have the electricity to get there, right? To operate these heat pumps constantly. If you don't, then you have an issue. Now you're going to run into a load issue. And so when we talk about what's good for downtown, right? When we talk about what can work there, well, you got a lot of buildings and you got the ground that can actually produce the cooling and heating for that building. And I'll put all this in the chat, Dr. B, I'll send it all to you because to talk about building decarbonization is to literally talk about the umbrella that covers this area and so many industries that are tied into it, okay? Heat transfer between buildings. What geothermal energy does is that when buildings cooling and heating or when buildings heating and it doesn't require that heating, it sends it through a primary loop system to a different building that may need that heating, and it transfers the load transfer over, okay? Creating tons of jobs for every trade, for every community, and to build our great programs, okay? And then we'll go a little bit, we talk about wastewater energy exchange. It's a pretty tough topic because those are gonna be very specific systems in every particular project where essentially when you use the restroom, you send it down the pipe, there's a lot of methane in there. There's a lot of sources of energy in there that can be reharnessed, reprocessed, and used to heat and cool a building depending on the system, okay? Next slide, please. All right. Okay, geothermal technology. When we talk about geothermal technology here in an urban environment, a lot of people think of geothermal as Lithium Valley, Kern County, brine coming out, using that to process lithium or rare metals, etc. But what a lot of people don't realize is that you could do geothermal energy underneath your building, inside your neighborhood. I always tell people this, in our decarb, we're going to build a lot of parks. That's a lot of room for piping that can literally use the ground to transfer heat. And I'll give you a really cool, somewhat of a simplistic way of looking at it, because I am a pipe welder, guys. All right, I'm not a scientist here, but your ground maintains the degrees of 55 degrees, right? So it's 55 degrees, never changes, doesn't matter where you're at in the world. That's a constant level of temperature that can then be used to transfer BTUs or British thermal units to heat and cool. So as we look at it, according to the NRDC geothermal technology, has been around for decades. This ain't something new, okay? It's been around for decades. Matter of fact, the Egyptians used it to heat and cool, by the way. Connecting buildings via underground pipes to joint thermal loop fed and shared geothermal well field. So what does that really mean to you guys? There's a primary loop that stays underground, that heats and cools, that adjusts to the pressure, the temperature of the land. Then we have a secondary loop per building that then switches the energy. Okay, that's essentially what that means. From an installer's perspective. Okay, a variety of names are being used to describe this concept, including district thermal or district loop heating. Okay, kind of give you guys another great example of what we've done on that. Oh, I'm getting time checked. I'm sorry, guys, but we've done it with steam in the past. Okay, so some of these pipes are already there. Next slide, please. I knew that was going to happen, Dr. B. I love this. Okay, so these are some slides. I am always available for coffee and to talk about these slides. These are all government-based research, evidence-based research of what's happening currently right now across our country. So, hey, I think I got everything in, Dr. B. You can cut me off now. I know I'm beyond my 5 to 7 minutes. So I love what I do. And then there's my contact information. Take a picture of it. See me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I will love to have a tough conversation with those who disagree, because that's how we're going to move forward, everybody. So thank you for your time and the privilege of speaking, Dr. B. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean. You sure love what you do. It was amazing. Okay, so I will skip my first question. It was about the ideas, because you have so many ideas in this presentation that our team will need to go over all of them to kind of put them into our implementation playbook. We'll also be posting your presentation so others can access it. And also, all your slides are so unique. You probably need to give a slide instruction on how to prepare all this 3D visualization in a PowerPoint.
Well, don't give me too much credit, Dr. B. I needed help from my wife. That's the truth. I'm a welder, not a computer expert.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I'll go to my first question. This is about the gaps in our knowledge base, and you you focused on my favorite topic, the district thermal energy, district heat pumps, and you highlighted how this is not imperial. We're not talking about geothermal resources that we need to tap into. This is just the temperature differential in the ground beneath our feet. So the earth provides for us.
Yep.
And when we think of new, I'm thinking of new projects right now, but you can also correct me if it's kind of something that can be done in, say, downtown or like La Jolla, UTC area, or high density mixed development, infill development. So between, like, how do we get this to scale to actually make a difference?
Absolutely.
in our region?
Absolutely, brother. Easy question. I thought your question was going to be a little bit harder, but this is a real easy question. Right now, with so many propositions and money coming in for road work, there's your opportunity. We're going to open up these roads to make them smarter, more efficient, and greener. There's your opportunity to put these systems in. Okay. Just so everybody knows that's watching this workshop, when you're on a timeline, you're trying to get everything in, but now I feel way more comfortable talking about this. So that being said, as we are redoing our infrastructure, as we're removing freeways and opening them up and adding more bike lanes in downtown and creating all of these great opportunities that I agree with, shoot, I can't wait to get an electric bike and go zoom right through downtown. But as we're doing this, right, we need to start thinking so outside of the box that we almost go back to what we did in the old days. So let me give you an example, right? So I can kind of tie it in. New York City, San Diego, back in the early 20s had steam loops throughout your city. So essentially you ran one steam loop, right, which provided tons of energy, which will then break into buildings and then provide that energy. But when natural gas came out so long ago, we found out that it was cheaper. That's all that happened, was that somebody found out it was cheaper to use natural gas. Now, here's where we're at. We have members in the natural gas industry, but I also have members in the bioenergy industry and in district thermal heating, which we're doing that work currently in other cities, especially on the East Coast, where they can use that temperature of the ground that's already giving you to transfer the heat at wintertime very, very efficiently. So when we're talking about decarbonization, it's not just electrification that can help you heat and cool. It's utilizing that items now. So to kind of answer your question without 6,000 words, as we are starting to open up these roads, as we are starting to create bike lanes, as we're starting to create these parks, which are very important on the framework, which are very important to so many stakeholders here, we need to put these pipe systems in with the skilled and trained workforce. And the reasoning for that is these can be anything from steam systems. It could be a lot, right? To sit there and give you an answer right now of what it can be, it would be incorrect because it would be based off of what engineers feel and what the heat transfer needs to be per project, per building, or per sector of the city. And so to give you an answer on what substance we can use and what system we can use, I can't do that. That's going to be a whole group of us to have to do that, from business to Dr. B and all that. But as we're building, we can do it now with these systems. So
thank you, Sean. That's optimism, this hope that we can decarbonize and at the same time do it in a not just a humane way, but build up our workers and our communities, because climate action and clean economy can occur in this hand in hand. And in the vein of that, in that vein, our workforce development study, authored by Dr. Carol Sabin, Bethany Jones, discusses high road partnerships. So my question then is to you, what potential role do you see the county playing in bringing everyone to the table to develop these kind of high road partnerships?
Well, first and foremost, Doctor, you're doing it now. Okay, let's be honest, everybody. There's people on this call right now that will fundamentally not see eye to eye with me, but we're having a discussion. So what can the county do? Well, you did it with the RDF. You're doing it with the workshop. And so as we move forward, we need to have these tough conversations. And I challenge everybody on this call to really have these tough conversations. Take away your hat. I want to tell people as we're looking at this, you're already doing it. The RDF has already specified exactly what we need to do. When you guys are putting on the playbook, or I'm sorry, the framework, it's there. The workshops are there. What we need to do as a society, as people, as leaders of our stakeholders that we currently have, we need to have these hard conversations. We need to have leadership, and we need to start thinking about what we can do to do demonstration projects. I give you a great example. You have a humongous port there that is one of the most hardest to decarbonize, right? Heavy industry. There's an opportunity to use those fuel cells. Okay. When we looking at the infill areas and the vehicle miles traveled, that's all gone through. And as we look at that, there is an opportunity as we are opening up the streets in downtown for the county or our great leaders at the Board of Supervisors to say, hey, so since it's open, instead of running, or as we rip out these natural gas pipelines, let's go ahead and put district thermal heating in and start doing these demonstration projects. So to answer your question without 6,000 words, you guys are already doing it. We're having these tough conversations. We're having meetings on this. We're doing workshops, and it's going to be a process, but I think it's going to be a process that's going to lead us into the future. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to find consensus, because we don't have a choice, everybody. Mars is pretty far and Venus isn't survivable. So, it's going to be, we have to come to consensus, everybody. And transitioning workers isn't the answer. Transitioning industry, transitioning the very culture of how we produce power is how we're going to do it, not getting rid of careers. So
thank you very much, Sean. On that really high note, we need to look for partnerships with industry, labor, and we'll continue this effort, this conversation. We're really encouraged by the support we receive all around from a variety of stakeholders in this process so far. And we want to now move towards implementation action. So appreciate your time. And I will transition to the next part of the program here today's, but I know that I had asked a few people to lower their hands if you would like, and then you can go now, or you can wait a little bit until Scott presents. So I'll give it 7 seconds to see if somebody really wants to go on the audio and speak right now. or wait? Okay, okay. Corey wants to go. Go ahead, Corey. Come on the audio channel if you're ready.
Hi, Dr. B. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay,
can hear you
perfect.
clearly.
I just wanted to note on the first presentation for the building electrification, she noted a study that said that with the in-home natural gas stoves, there was increase of asthma incidences. I have been seeing that study around, but I wanted to note that that study was conducted in 2013. And they did say that mitigation for that issue, if you cannot afford electrification, if you can't afford to buy a new stove, the mitigation to avoid and decrease the issues that might rise with asthma and such, it would be to turn on the vent, which should be within code, it's above your stove. And then if you are in close quarters, then you can open your window for ventilation. Also, when the county comes in or with utilities comes in, if you are using a biogas or renewable natural gas replacement for your natural gas, meaning you have a cleaner fuel in your existing grid, then that's also net zero and it decreases and cleans up the source. That's all.
Thank you so much, Corey. If I think you put the information right here, right in the chat. Does that cover the topics you just said?
You can put up a different one. That one's for the district thermal heating.
Okay. I think our team is capturing what you just said. So Danny may not be here, but our team is recording it. So
Okay.
and if you and of course you have our contact. So if you have any further, please send it to us information. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else that wants to go on the audio, because we need to discuss. Okay, thank you. So we need to discuss the implementation playbook, which is we're in the stages of drafting this report with the help of University of San Diego's Energy Policy Initiative Center. They're here with us today. We intend to present the playbook to our Board of Supervisors in spring of next year. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll quickly cover it. It will draw out actions at organization, business, and government level, then building up on those actions at a community-wide level, and then at a regional level where we can gain efficiencies and greater outcomes for a more collective impact. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott Enders from the Energy Policy Initiative Center, or EPIC.
Thanks, Murtaza, and thanks again to the speakers. So I just wanted to provide some context to some of the materials provided prior to the meeting. One of the things we've done is to, as you may have seen in the materials we sent out, is to categorize the actions in the playbook by the implementation mechanism, or the how it would be implemented. And these are the 8 areas, or the 8 different mechanisms that we categorize them into. And just wanted to note that some of these actions directly reduce emissions and some may not. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but these are the categories to try to help understand what type of action is it. So is it a capital project like Sean is talking about, tearing up the road, or is it an education and awareness program? Next slide. So also we included 3 criteria to help provide some preliminary information about these actions: greenhouse gas reduction potential, cost, and time to implement, sorry. And so in terms of greenhouse gas reduction potential, this is a relative greenhouse gas reduction compared to the other actions. And when we say to the other actions, what we mean is at that same scale. So Murtaza talked about, or the levels Murtaza talked about, the organization, community, and region. We want to make sure we're always comparing within each of those, because you know, an individual organization planting 10 trees versus you know, the whole region of San Diego being on 100% renewable electricity are just not necessarily comparable. And then also want to note that some actions have no direct reductions, as I mentioned earlier, like education. So it's kind of difficult to estimate the impact of education. Now, we recognize that it's important and it's necessary but not sufficient to reduce emissions. But just want to point out that you might see NA on the list because we're not ascribing any estimated reduction to those, whereas there are other actions that have some either direct reduction or their methods to estimate the reductions. Next bullet. Time to complete. Excuse me. This again is the relative time compared to other actions. So to carry on this example, it's quicker to add a page to a website than it is to build a bike lane. Next bullet. And in terms of the cost, again, relative to other actions, so cheaper to add a page to a website than it is to build bike lanes. So these are some of the criteria that you'll get in the tables. Next slide. And we just want to point out that these are preliminary estimates, kind of, you could think of them almost as averages, if you will, because within a particular category, it's impossible to come up with a number or a ranking or a rating that would cover everything. So even just thinking about education, it could be a page or a website, or it could be a region-wide public service campaign with television commercials, which would be hugely different in terms of cost. So we're kind of talking about the general category, we're talking about in general, and really these are intended to provide some initial screening for decision making. These are not intended to be take it to the bank numbers. These are, if you want to know in general what's going to be more expensive, these are the things. What's going to reduce more emissions, those are those things. And then if you wanted to see the actual cost or the actual greenhouse gas reductions of a specific project, you'd have to do additional analysis for that. And then we also recognize that there are other considerations beyond those three criteria that we listed on the last slide. So there are co-benefits like reduced air pollution, environmental quality, public health, and we recognize that these are very important co-benefits, but the primary concern of the regional decarbonization framework is greenhouse gas emissions and reductions. We also recognize that, as we've talked about on this call already, workforce and equity considerations are very important, and those will be addressed in the playbook, but not at this point as a criteria as we listed on the previous page. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Murtaza.
Thank you, Scott. And I'll be turning to materials we sent prior to this meeting. As I'm doing that, if any of you want to come on the audio, you can raise your hand, and as soon as I'm done with this, I'll call on you. You don't have to come on the audio. You can provide us feedback in a variety of ways through the Engage platform, through email, calling us, as well as this chat. This chat is being recorded and will be transmitted to our consultants to pair with the activities that they are putting together. So this picture here on the screen is a snapshot of the matrix for building related measures from the EPIC database, which has been derived from climate action plans, as well as supplemented with the feedback received during the first workshop and from our stakeholders. This is available for comment directly under the document review tab in the Engage platform. And we invite you to provide some initial comments and feedbacks in order to inform the drafting of this playbook. The two categories for organization are energy efficiency and electrification. Scott has already gone over the columns. It's about implementation mechanism, which is the types, and then estimate time to complete, short, mid-term, and long, estimated greenhouse gas impacts, which are low, medium, high, and estimated cost, once again, low, medium, and high. Next. This slide shows a similar matrix at the community scale with the same categories. I'll skip that. And this final slide shows the regional angle. This is a little bit difficult to fill out since it is new to folks to think at a regional scale. We continue to ask this question wherever the regional decarbonization framework is presented. We're presenting to city councils, to regional agencies, stakeholders like your organizations, community groups, wherever we go and we ask for this question, what can we do at a regional scale? What can we do together that we cannot do on our own? And we will get there. This level has 3 categories for the region: energy efficiency, electrification, and low carbon fuels. So today we'd like to hear from you. We want you to think of the implementation playbook that is drafted as a result of this collective effort. And as I had mentioned earlier, the 3 questions that we are particularly focused on, they're action related. First is what works or does not work based upon your experience. Second, what are the impacts on underserved communities, either positive or negative? And thirdly, what are we missing? What are the types of activities that would include research and development, implementation, financial incentives, workforce training, education and outreach, as well as activities to implement actions and monitor progress. With that, I'll take comments, questions on the audio. Go ahead, Carl, if you're ready to come on.
Hey, everybody. So I looked at the matrix earlier, and I did have a suggestion that the column header for the impacts, I would suggest that we change the word impact to emissions, or sorry, reductions, because it's very unclear whether we're talking about a negative impact or a positive impact. Another suggestion I would make is that the NAs be stricken from that column, and instead we try to actually make an estimation about how these education and or other types of policies will actually make reductions, because it really, what you're going to have is elected officials are going to scan this matrix, whether it's in this form or in some other form, and they're going to see these NAs and think, well, if it's got a high cost and it has no impact on emissions, I need to look for the things in this chart that do have an impact on emissions, a reduction of emissions. So I get why it was done, but I think it's really important to not do that, because it undermines the credibility and the need for some of these bigger efforts, which is education and promotion and incentives and strategies and plans. Those things are all probably much more important than what we might classify as a capital cost. So I just wanted to point that out. I did put it in the online version already, so don't necessarily have to go from what I'm saying here, but if other folks disagree with that, maybe this is a good time to discuss that.
Thank you, Carl, for your critique on how the categorization works. And also we received the comment today on the heating system and fluctuation during the time of day in which that could work. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, if you Christina has been waiting patiently for a very long time, so go ahead, Christina.
Impatiently, but yeah. Thank you, Mr. B. I appreciate you, and thanks for putting this on. Like Sean said, you know, you guys are already doing the right things and including everybody in these workshops so that we can get different views on everybody and know that many of these things need to occur together simultaneously, and make sure that while doing this, that it creates high road, high wage jobs, right? That's the main thing, because it ends up being a circular economy, and making sure that, you know, if we pay these people good money, if we hire local, the money will come back to us. So I was thinking, just kind of when BEI was doing their presentation, when they said one-stop shop, how about, and I don't know how this would work, if the county has some sort of approval criteria to have contractors there approved based on, you know, what type of training they have, the certifications they have. Like if we're going to do EV charging stations, they have to obviously have EVITP certification. They have to have a C10 electrical contractors certification. And I know Sean has a lot of other different types of certifications for the type of work that he's doing. So if the county can have something of that sort, you know, when we need to do heat pump installations, we have electricians, we have the plumbers and pipe fitters, we have anybody else that needs to do that type of work ready and waiting, so that there is no excuse on getting this work done when we do transfer over to decarbonize. And I don't want to say electrify, because like Sean said, that is not the total answer. It has to be everything simultaneously. So I like to say decarbonization. So I'm thinking, you know, if the county can have something like that for contractors that are like at the ready, and know that these contractors can be called upon to do a heat pump installation or EV charging station or solar or microgrid or just battery backup on, and they'll have it because they've already been approved and they know they'll be called upon to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. This is quite a deep topic you brought up. I think we'll have to follow up a little bit more to see how we can operationalize that direct connection, especially with the database of activities. So let's just follow up on this, Christina.
I didn't expect an answer, but I know that that's just something that I think that we need to kind of touch upon now in order to be ready for when we do want to do implementation. That's part of the
Right.
process, is having these people ready to do this work.
Got
You know,
it.
they have to go through a certain criteria. It can't just be Joe Schmo off the street to do the work. It needs to be certified and trained in their specific role. So thanks.
Got it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll need to follow up on how we kind of tie it into the implementation playbook, but some very, very salient point. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. I think Kelly has been waiting, and then Sean. So go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. No, I've appreciated all the conversations today and all the different things we've looked at. You know, I think one thing that's going to be important to take into account is that the state is leading the way on some of these decisions already in terms of how, you know, that some of the parameters that we're going to need to work within. And I think one of the big ones is the 2030 phase out of gas and space water heating appliances, that when you have a burnout, you're going to have to go electric. And we really need to figure out how to get our communities ready. That's not very far away in time. And one of the experiences that I've had, both personally and in working with the community, is that I do feel that this technical assistance that BEI mentioned, one-stop shop, you can call it any number of things, is going to be a really crucial element. And it's more than a web page. It's more than just sort of one-way education. The reality is that homes are unique. They have different cases and different situations. It's going to take resources to understand that. And in particular, I think it's critical for managing the cost. You know, there was a nice dialogue in the chat around panel upgrades. There's a fair amount of discussion in the community around this now. There are many creative ways that are emerging to avoid panel upgrades. But that's not well known, and often the first contractor you call, they're willing to upgrade you to 200 amps, and that's going to cost a lot of money. And so figuring out how to create local, you know, culturally appropriate resources for all our different communities to be ready to do a quick turn when it's time to go electric is, in my mind, going to be crucial, and is something to think about how we're going to support that on a regional level. So I wanted to bring up that thought.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. That one-stop shop concept will be difficult when you have such a dispersed client base, right? Especially in the housing stock. I know in the energy side, there's been more progress, because like you can, after a certain level of user, you make it economical to create that kind of a transition with maybe a microgrid transition, or energy changing of your, you know, entire electrical system. So also going with a little bit touch this BEI's point about intersection between energy upgrades and energy efficiency is somewhat kind of the subject of the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the incentives there. So there's potential money to to allow this kind of bundling to occur at scale. And if there are folks listening and wanting that kind of partnership, those are kind of opportunities that our region could tap into at scale. All right, I'll go to Sean next.
Thank you, Dr. B. I just wanted to make a few comments to just kind of reinforce what my sister Christina said. You know, when we're in so many workshops, so many meetings about the community, and you know, I'm going to go into project labor agreements and being able as a society to really talk about who's building these systems. You know, I'm going to talk about high efficiency heat pumps, right? What's in there? Refrigerant. It's bad for the environment. And you know, we have people right now throughout the region that are installing it without an apprenticeship, without a proper training to understand what they're doing. And I'll give you a great example. Most of the natural gas that's being used right now, fossil fuels, et cetera, they fall under SB 54, which is a state bill that calls those chemical and hazardous materials. What would be great if this region can understand and fully grasp that concept is when we're putting refrigeration systems inside our buildings, those are hazardous to your health. When we're using district thermal heating and we're using water, right? I'm going to tell you something about high efficiency heat pumps and water pumps. You get more transfer with water. But what are we in, everybody? A drought, right? And so if we're actually going to do systems, geothermal heat pumps that are going to cool everything, we have to have that conversation. Look, we have to start thinking, like, if we're going to put these systems in, they need to be a skilled and trained workforce, or you'll just have a free-for-all, right? And a great example is, let's talk about it, solar industry. IBW is working their tails off to get that unionized. Here's the facts. 20, 30, 100 shops will open up like this. And if there was language at the county level or in the region, a lot of those would have been good, sustainable jobs. So, you know, and right now they're fighting hard to do it. And so we see that as a future with when it comes to heat pumps installation, when it comes to on-site water reuse items like that. So it's incredibly important that, you know, we're all here caring about the community, wanting to do the right change. So we got to have that talk. We got to have a talk about, you know, legislation that's going to guarantee the right people doing the work. You don't want a carpenter putting up an air conditioning unit, and you don't want us pipe fitters putting up your walls. So that's all I got to say. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands raised. I'll do a last call. If you have any questions or comments on the particularly about building decarbonization sector, this is our second and final workshop as we are putting that chapter, final workshop in building decarbonization. There's one more remaining on Friday about land use and natural climate resources. As we are drafting our implementation playbook. Oh, I see there's two more hands raised. Okay, go ahead, Serena, if you're ready on the audio.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm going to start calling you Dr. B as well. Sean, I like that nickname. Love that. But yeah, thanks for the presentations today. They were all really great and great discussion. I just want to add one quick note about the document that was uploaded. I see in both the organization and the community sections that there's specific callouts for developing education programs. And I think I would just add, and this is likely just details that would be added in later, but just highlight the importance of sharing the public health aspects when we're doing that education and outreach with different communities and stakeholders, so that they're aware of not just the climate reasons that we're doing this, but also the public health reasons to transition to other options from natural gas in our homes and buildings. So I would just add that as an important key to helping stakeholders understand why there's another critical component for this switch.
Thank you, Serena. That's very insightful observation. And if you have anything else to follow up on, please let us know. It's kind of important, your observation. And email or any other way. And with that, I will have two more. Kelly, is that a legacy hand or you want to go over? Go
I
ahead.
did want to add a second topic if I may.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Too far. I didn't want to go too long the first time. You know, the other thing that I wanted to make sure that we consider, and it was alluded to briefly in the BEI slides, is what I'm hearing called zonal electrification, where folks will identify a neighborhood or a campus where the money that would have been spent on maintaining the pipelines is instead redirected to the electrification. There's currently a pilot that PG&E is planning to do with Cal State University, Monterey Bay. And I would think that there may be certain areas that have perhaps the older pipes that might make sense to take a look at in the San Diego region. So I hope that's something that we can look at kind of on a regional basis to understand the state of the system and where those opportunities might lie.
Thank you, Kelly. We'll ask my team to look at zonal electrification, and particularly, it seems like there's increased utility interest across the country, and particularly with some of the incentives coming from the state and federal level. Appreciate that. And Rimga, go ahead.
Didn't think
Rimga,
I'd stay quiet for a whole meeting. No. A quick question of clarification: when we're reviewing all of these actions, who is in the intended doer of the actions? So when we say education program, is this a playbook for the county staff, or is this to be adopted by any jurisdiction? Or how should we be looking at these?
Thank you, Rimga. That is so I just want to kind of give you all Rimga is with the city of Solana Beach, and one of the cities that is undergoing a climate action plan update. So this is the kind of city, and I've discussed this with some of the other cities too. The county wants to partner with in order to see what efficiencies we can get in coordinating the development of these climate action plan measures, but also aligning with the regional decarbonization framework. So that's the kind of context for everybody that's listening. Rimga's question is, does this kind of, when we develop this implementation playbook, then who is kind of the intended audience? Am I getting that right, Rimga?
Yes. So when it says like implement, education program or something as one of the measures, is that county implementing it, or so who is doing the action of the actions?
Right. So let me in the big picture here is, since we're transitioning from study to action as a region, and we're going to as we're going to discussion about collaboration on implementation, this playbook, we're calling it a playbook because it is intended to be an accessible resource. So a playbook, not a plan, that does not have the mandates that a plan would typically have, but allows the discussion to occur between jurisdictions, so cities, government agencies, but also down to become accessible enough for individuals and businesses to pursue on their own. So oftentimes our climate action plans are just directed to what the government can do. The intent of this implementation playbook is to be accessible for a vast, or if you will, anybody in the region, to be able to take and say, what can I do? And that I could be as an individual, as a household, as well as a business. So does that answer your question, Rimga?
Yeah, it does. And it kind of goes with how we're doing our city plan too. Like a resident can transition to an electric vehicle, and the city can do their fleet. So I just think it might be helpful as a general comment then is just, to identify which actors can make the changes. Like building owners versus business owners is different too, but yeah, that helps me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rimga, and appreciate the cities that have attended our workshops and also provided us feedback in the development of this implementation playbook. I think I don't need to emphasize it too much that our leadership and our board of supervisors is paying close attention to the suggestions that are being generated here, and we're making our best effort to transmit it so that we can resource this and we can have the ability to be able to move forward as a region. I do have Serena's hand up. Is that a legacy hand or do you
It's a
want to
new
come on the
hand.
audio?
It's a new hand, but I promise it's a quick question. Just wondering in terms of format. So I know that this is obviously a draft version, prepared kind of to use in the working group, but the actual implementation playbook that will be shared in the new year, will the format be similar to the document that we're able to access now, or will the format be significantly different? Just wondering to set our expectations, and then so we can draft our input, keeping in mind what the end format will be.
So Serena, what we have shared are just tables, printouts from the Apex database that we've been trying to load up with the information we're gathering. So it is somewhat indicative of what's going to be in the implementation playbook, but that's what we've been sharing, or not the chapters, if you will, of the implementation playbook. We expect the draft to be available for public review in December, and we'll as at the time we release the draft, we'll have a public, like it'll be posted publicly, and a public workshop. So we will walk through the entire document. So then folks across the region can then comment on the entirety of the document.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Serena. I don't see any other hands raised, and I do really appreciate you all for an amazing, a very substantive and respectful discussion on a very heavy topic, building electrification. This is a huge milestone for us, and I appreciate you all coming in this journey with us. I do think that there are some important next steps, particularly because as we are gearing up for the board approval in March, I want to turn it over to I just want to thank you all from my heart and turn it over to my colleague, Yasamin, to give us the next steps. Go ahead, Yasamin.
All right, so here is our timeline through spring of next year. To ensure robust engagement and outreach, and that all the voices are brought along through the design of the implementation actions. So the yellow highlight shows where we are now, which is the special topic working groups, to help draft the implementation playbook. And we intend to have a draft of the playbook, like Morteza said, for public review in December. And in January, we will have the regional convenings and partnerships with community-based organizations to receive public input on our proposed actions. There will be 5 regional convenings, 1 in each supervisorial district, and will include all cities, the unincorporated county, and tribes. Please be sure to join us for these regional convenings. A notice will be sent out as soon as we finalize the dates. And finally, we intend to seek the board adoption of the integrated framework in spring of 2023 and receive direction on regional actions. So this concludes our second and final workshop in the Buildings Working Group. Our next working group is on land use and natural climate solutions on Thursday, November 3rd. So if you are interested in attending, please make sure you are registered. And as always, the county appreciates your time and input, and we will all see you very soon. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.